The story begins with a young man named Min Jae, who was born into a poor family and has been nothing but a burden to them. To make matters worse, he suffered from a severe illness as a child, forcing his father to donate one of his kidneys to save him. His mother, desperate to afford his treatment, borrowed money from various sources, including the bank. As a result, their family's financial situation spiraled into chaos. The bank's relentless harassment only added to Min Jae's overwhelming guilt. Min Jae felt deceived by the bank's seemingly low-interest loan, which turned out to be a trap leading to endless hardship. Fueled by resentment towards the bank that had tricked his family, Min Jae reached out to a fraud syndicate led by a man named Suk-go. His plan was to drain the bank's funds with Suk-go's help, as the syndicate specialized in deception and manipulation. At the same time, Min Jae would pose as a young CEO in desperate need of capital to keep his business afloat, making it easier for the bank to approve his loan. The bank, however, issued a stern warning. This was a high-risk loan. If Min Jae failed to repay it, he could face imprisonment. However, Min Jae was no naive fool. While Suk-go was an expert in manipulation, Min Jae was even more cunning. Once the loan was approved, he immediately transferred the money to his friend, Jin Hyuk, and then pretended that the bank had rejected his request. He claimed his account balance remained at zero. This enraged Suk-go's associate, Ki-tae, who grabbed Min Jae's phone and called the bank himself. What Ki-tae didn't realize was that Min Jae had already outsmarted them. He had arranged for his friend, Hae-soon, to pose as a bank employee. Fooled by her act, Ki-tae had no choice but to give up, allowing Min Jae to walk away with the money he had taken, his revenge finally complete. Now in possession of a large sum, Min Jae, along with Hae-soon and Jin Hyuk, sought to lighten his family's burden through their shared business, selling counterfeit luxury watches. Each timepiece Min Jae sold was a near-perfect replica, indistinguishable from the real thing. Their supplier was an elderly man who owned a watch shop, where Min Jae invested his stolen money in purchasing 30 dozen fake Rolex watches. However, what Min Jae didn't know was that Hae-soon had been harboring her own deceitful intentions all along. Elsewhere, Ki-tae reported Min Jae's supposed failure to secure the loan. But Suk-go, a seasoned con man, immediately realized that Ki-tae had been duped. This revelation infuriated Jaewon, Suk-go's partner, who did not hesitate to lash out at Ki-tae for losing their money. However, the situation quickly took a turn when Suk-go and Jaewon managed to track down Min Jae's accomplice, Jin Hyuk. There, Jaewon was seen mercilessly beating Jin Hyuk, leaving Min Jae with no choice but to surrender and go with them. Recognizing Min Jae's intelligence, Suk-go made him an unexpected offer, a position within their syndicate. However, Jaewon was clearly displeased with Min Jae's presence in their group. But since Suk-go was convinced that Min Jae could bring them even greater profits, Jaewon had no choice but to comply. It was also in this moment that Min Jae learned of Ki-tae's demotion, a clear warning to everyone that mistakes were not tolerated in their world. Knowing that Ki-tae worked as an enforcer, Min Jae approached him one evening with a proposal. Min Jae had the brains, and Ki-tae had the brawn, a perfect combination for this line of work. Moreover, Min Jae felt sympathy for Ki-tae's current situation. Seeing the logic in Min Jae's offer, Ki-tae accepted without hesitation. The next morning, the two began working together. With Min Jae's intelligence and Ki-tae's strength, they quickly gained new clients. Their successful partnership also significantly boosted Suk-go's business, to the point that Jaewon's subordinate, Song-wi, grew envious. Min Jae was now regarded as Suk-go's golden boy. That same day, a client arrived seeking assistance. Suk-go assigned Song-wi to handle the request. However, due to the client's carelessness and Song-wi's panic, the operation ended in failure. Furious, Jaewon lashed out at Song-wi, and the group had no choice but to flee as the police were closing in on them. Shortly after, reports of fraud had already reached law enforcement, and Inspector Chun-ha was eager to investigate the case. However, his two colleagues showed little interest, leaving Chun-ha to pursue the case alone. Recently, while attending university, Min-jae noticed a police officer lingering around campus. However, he reassured his friend that he would ensure their safety. True to his word, the next morning, Min-jae spotted Inspector Chun-ha posting a wanted notice with Min-jae's name on it. Realizing the danger, Min-jae quickly disguised himself as an ordinary student, successfully deceiving Chun-ha, who unknowingly handed him a stack of flyers to distribute. It turned out that the client who failed to secure a loan had reported the syndicate to Chun-ha, but she only remembered a few details, including Min-jae's nickname. Because of this, Chun-ha was still uncertain about the true identity of the mastermind behind the operation. Seeing how rapidly their business was expanding, Ji-won proposed that Suk-go partner with the bank to further their operations. However, this went against Suk-go's principles. He had founded his business to help those in financial distress. Collaborating with the bank, known for its high-interest loans, would only exploit their clients rather than assist them. Meanwhile, Chun-ha returned to the police station, where the same client from before filed another report. This time, she claimed that Suk-go's syndicate had contacted her again. Without hesitation, Chun-ha seized her phone and managed to track down the exact location of Suk-go's office. Upon arrival, Chun-ha found Suk-go at the office and immediately questioned him about his fraudulent activities. However, Suk-go denied any wrongdoing, insisting that Chun-ha had the wrong place. Before Chun-ha could act, Suk-go cleverly distracted him and made a quick escape. It was later revealed that Song-wi, driven by jealousy toward Min-jae, had orchestrated the entire situation. He had bribed the client into exposing the company's secrets. Realizing that things were spiraling out of control, Suk-go decided it was time to retire. He no longer wanted to live in the shadows. Before stepping away, he handed over his client database to Min-jae, hoping that Min-jae would build his own company, one that operated on better principles. Without hesitation, Min-jae called upon several of Suk-go's most trusted associates. The first was Hong-yoon, a financial expert who had been Suk-go's right hand for years. Next, they needed someone skilled in forgery, and that was where Jin-hyuk came in. Known for his incredible artistic talent, Jin-hyuk could replicate a Van Gogh painting worth 400 billion won using nothing more than his younger siblings' crayons. Determined to modernize their operations, Min-jae refused to rely on traditional methods. Instead, he launched an online loan website, making it easier for clients to apply for bank loans through their platform. As days passed, Min-jae's new business flourished, attracting more and more clients. His wealth grew exponentially, and he regularly sent money to his family as a way to ease his guilt for the burdens he had caused them. In a short time, his business amassed over 400,000 members. To show gratitude to his three loyal friends, Hong-yoon, Jin-hyuk, and Ki-tae, Min-jae gifted each of them a brand new Mercedes, free of any loans or waiting periods. However, instead of excitement, their expressions seemed indifferent. Perhaps the cars weren't to their taste, or maybe they were troubled by the changes in Min-jae. Meanwhile, Ji-won and Song-wi had partnered with a bank and founded a financial institution called Mirai. With vast financial backing, Ji-won swiftly accumulated massive wealth, eliminating competition by any means necessary, even if it meant playing dirty. Min-jae lamented the fact that Ji-won had abandoned their old ways. As time passed, the aggressive tactics of Ji-won's company began to take a severe toll. Fraud and debt levels in Korea skyrocketed, pushing thousands of people into financial ruin. Protesters gathered daily outside Ji-won's office, but as impoverished individuals with no power, they could do little more than voice their grievances. True to the saying, money reveals a person's true nature. With his growing fortune, Min-jae became increasingly arrogant, dismissing the advice of his closest allies. To make matters worse, he reconnected with Hae-soon, the woman who had once betrayed him. Confident in her abilities and charm, Min-jae believed that with Hae-soon by his side, their business could run even more smoothly. Meanwhile, Chun-ha had finally gathered solid evidence on Min-jae. He obtained Min-jae's photo and academic records, confirming that the young man he had encountered before was indeed the one he had been searching for. However, Chun-ha's colleagues continued to downplay the severity of the case, arguing that fraud was nowhere near as serious as murder. They urged him to approach the matter calmly. What they failed to understand was that many deaths were linked to financial ruin. People driven to despair by insurmountable debt often saw no way out. If this syndicate continued to operate unchecked, how many more lives would be destroyed? Despite Chun-ha's passionate argument, his words fell on deaf ears. Determined to find Min-jae, Chun-ha repeatedly visited his family home. But Min-jae's parents, weary of his persistent questioning, refused to disclose their son's whereabouts. They did everything in their power to drive Chun-ha away. However, when Min-jae's father coughed, Chun-ha became convinced that Min-jae was inside. Taking a bold risk, Chun-ha attempted to climb over the house's gate, but before he could get any further, 2 security guards intercepted him. They demanded to see his official warrant, but without one, Chun-ha had no choice but to retreat, giving Min-jae the perfect opportunity to escape right under his nose. Elsewhere, Min-jae's greed continued to grow under Hae-soon's influence. He devised a plan to use clients' insurance policies as collateral for their services, further tightening his grip on the industry. His friends' warnings no longer mattered to him. His mind was consumed by insatiable ambition. Upon returning to his office, Min-jae found Ji-won waiting for him. It was no surprise. Ji-won had grown envious of Min-jae's rapidly expanding business. With a menacing glare, Ji-won issued a warning. If Min-jae dared to interfere with his business, he would not live to regret it. Yet, Min-jae merely smiled, claiming that his only goal was to help those in need. Ji-won grew increasingly frustrated as Min-jae started acting like Suk-go in front of him. Sensing an opportunity, Song-wi secretly stole Min-jae's customer database and transferred it to Ji-won's company. As Min-jae lay battered and bruised, Ji-won issued a final warning. If Min-jae dared to interfere with his business again, he wouldn't hesitate to eliminate him. Hae-soon, seeing Ji-won as the more promising option, chose to side with him, abandoning Min-jae when he had nothing left. With his business crumbling, possibly beyond recovery, Min-jae turned to Suk-go for help. However, Suk-go refused, having already retired from the game. To him, money no longer held any value. He already had more than enough to last a lifetime. But Min-jae, now desperate, begged for his assistance, knowing his only chance at survival depended on salvaging what remained of his business. Pitying him, Suk-go arranged a meeting with Baek-ho, a bank executive who had refused to work with Ji-won. Apparently, Baek-ho had disapproved of Ji-won's exploitative methods, believing they clashed with his principles. However, if Min-jae wanted Baek-ho's help, he had a promise to leave this world behind as soon as possible. Suk-go's goodwill, however, quickly vanished when he discovered that Min-jae had been using customer insurance policies as collateral. Furious, Suk-go confronted him, but Min-jae stubbornly defended his actions, arguing that insurance was no different from any other form of collateral. To him, they were the same. In response, Suk-go grabbed a boiling kettle and spilled its scalding contents toward Min-jae, who instinctively jumped back to avoid it. Seeing this, Suk-go immediately asks why he flinched, since it was just water. Suk-go further explains that something as seemingly harmless as water can cause severe burns and long-lasting scars. That, he said, was the true value of insurance. It was meant to protect people, not exploit them. His words hit Min-jae like a dagger. He realized he had become no different from Ji-won. He had abandoned everything Suk-go once taught him. Suk-go then bid him farewell, urging him to surrender and take responsibility for his actions. If Min-jae refused to change, there was no point in continuing down this path. Meanwhile, Min-jae narrowly escaped Inspector Chun-ha's pursuit. Determined to find his family, he tracked down their new address, only to discover they were now living in a rundown neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. When Min-jae saw his mother, his anger immediately peaked and asked why she was living there even though he had sent her money every month. But his mother had long known the truth behind his wealth. She had never touched a single cent of the money he sent. To her, money was meaningless if it came from wrongdoing. However, Min-jae, still blinded by his own beliefs, insisted that he only wanted to give his parents a better life. He knew they had fallen into poverty because of him. He knew his father had donated a kidney, leaving him unable to work just to save his life. Min-jae refused to let regret consume him. Then, his father appeared, noticing Min-jae's well-dressed appearance. Instead of scolding him, his father smiled proudly, saying that knowing his son was living well was already more than enough for them. Suk-go's words, along with those of his parents, finally began to sink in. Min-jae slowly realized how deeply money had corrupted him. He finally understood that his business was hurting countless people. Determined to set things right, he made a plan to put an end to it all. Using his intelligence, Min-jae hacked into Chun-ha's email, sending crucial banking records to help retrieve the stolen customer data. Then, one by one, he sought out the victims who had suffered under Ji-won and his subordinates. The devastation was worse than he imagined. Some had been brutally beaten by Song-wi, their faces disfigured beyond recognition. Others lay in hospital beds, barely clinging to life after enduring relentless torture from Ji-won's men. Knowing this, Min-jae shuddered at the thought. If he hadn't met Suk-go and spoken to his parents, he might have become just like Ji-won, consumed entirely by greed. Determined to atone for his mistakes, Min-jae set a plan in motion, one that would allow him to make things right, no matter the cost. Meanwhile, Suk-go was being interrogated by the police, but when asked about Min-jae, he chose to remain silent. Frustrated, one of the officers struck him, prompting Chun-ha to step in and break up the situation, insisting that they needed to handle things peacefully. As Suk-go was being led toward his holding cell, Chun-ha suddenly changed direction. He discreetly handed Suk-go a key to his handcuffs and took him to an abandoned building. There, Chun-ha inflicted an injury upon himself to create a distraction and urged Suk-go to escape immediately. It was revealed that Chun-ha had secretly conspired with Min-jae. Before this, Min-jae had voluntarily turned himself in, confessing to all his crimes. However, he pleaded with Chun-ha for one last opportunity, an opportunity to put an end to everything once and for all. If only Min-jae were arrested, the fraudulent syndicate would continue to thrive. Many powerful corporations would still be out there, preying on innocent people. Therefore, Min-jae convinced Chun-ha to help him go after the true mastermind behind it all, Ji-won. Standing before Suk-go, Min-jae expressed his resolve. He wished to carry out one final mission, not for personal gain, but to atone for his mistakes. His goal was to bring down Ji-won and finally choose a better life. With that, Suk-go went to meet Ji-won at a restaurant. Meanwhile, Ji-won was shocked to see his old friend standing before him. However, Suk-go wasn't there to borrow money. Instead, he informed Ji-won that someone was waiting for him in the next room. Inside, Baek-ho sat across from an empty chair, ready to propose a business deal. He introduced Ji-won to a new opportunity, the funeral home loan business. Baek-ho explained that it was an incredibly profitable venture with limitless returns. At first, Ji-won was skeptical, sensing something suspicious about both Suk-go and Baek-ho. However, the lucrative offer was too enticing to resist, and in the end, Ji-won agreed to the deal. Unbeknownst to him, everything had been orchestrated by Min-jae. Not only that, Min-jae had also begun reaching out to all his former allies who were now working under Ji-won, Hong-yoon, Jin-hyuk, Ki-tae, and even Hae-soon, whom he had once trusted the most. He devised a strategy to throw Ji-won's entire operation into chaos. When Ji-won finally realized that he had been deceived, he immediately reported Min-jae to two police officers, both of whom happened to be Chunha's colleagues. Meanwhile, Suk-go had undergone a complete transformation, dressing and styling himself to closely resemble Ji-won. Accompanied by Jin Hyuk, he set off to meet with the funeral home's owner. Without hesitation, Suk-go, posing as Ji-won, finalized the agreement, stating that he had officially purchased the funeral home and would manage it alongside Baek-ho. However, the owner hesitated, fearing that Ji-won's bank would exploit the establishment for illicit activities once again. Elsewhere, Ji-won rushed into his office, only to be confronted by Ki-tae and his men, resulting in an all-out brawl. As Ji-won entered the room, he found it completely empty. His phone rang, and on the other end was Hae-soon, informing him that all the money from the office and the accounts had been transferred elsewhere. She coldly told Ji-won that he had lost everything. When Ji-won returned to his office, he was met by Min-jae, who was already waiting for him. Min-jae spoke with an air of finality, saying that syndicates like theirs were built on the desperation of those struggling to survive. They preyed on people who had sacrificed everything just for a chance at a better life. And for that reason, Ji-won needed to take responsibility, not just by going to prison, but by rotting in hell for his sins. Min-jae's words sent Ji-won into a frenzy, pushing him to the edge of madness. Overcome with rage, Ji-won lunged at Min-jae, intending to end him right then and there. However, before he could do anything, Chunha arrived just in time, placing Ji-won under arrest on multiple charges: embezzlement, corruption, fraud, bribery, and even murder. Ji-won realized that this was truly the end for him, and no amount of struggle could change that. With Ji-won captured, Min-jae's journey was also coming to a close. It was time to walk away from everything. But he refused to leave things unresolved. Time passed, and Ji-won and his entire syndicate were eventually convicted, facing severe sentences for their crimes. Meanwhile, Min-jae and his allies stood before a truck filled with cash, the stolen wealth taken from Ji-won's bank. With the help of Hae-soon and Hong-yoon, they had managed to switch Ji-won's real bank book with a forged one created by Jin Hyuk. Additionally, Hae-soon had secretly copied Ji-won's fingerprint, allowing them access to his vault. Min-jae then set out on his final task, returning the stolen money to Ji-won's victims. He knew all too well the agony of being cast aside, of living in poverty, of struggling just to survive. That pain was suffocating, and so, in an act of redemption, he decided to return the money to those who had suffered. This was the most humane thing he could do. With this final act, Min-jae resolved to leave his dark past behind and put an end to his life of crime once and for all. Moral lesson from the story: if you borrow money from a bank to scam the bank, don't forget to also scam your friends. Otherwise, you'll end up with fake Rolexes and real problems. And remember, even if you're the smartest crook in the room, boiling water will always remind you that insurance is not a toy.